Welcome to Leadership Lessons, a show in which I, Cademan Kovacs, a first-year business student, interview leaders from around the world, getting insights into the lessons they learned, teaching you how to be a better leader for tomorrow. Well, we are here with Chip Wilson. Thank you very much for letting me have you on this podcast. It's an incredible opportunity. You are a man who needs no introduction, but the founder of West Beach, the founder of Lululemon, the person who started so many incredible initiatives within your retirement. So thank you so much for being on this podcast.
You know, it's my absolute pleasure. I think that if I had a lot of people when I was in my first secondary university that really, stood out for me, and so I'm paying it forward.
Thank you. I'm very, very gracious to be that person that you're paying it forward to, but let's get right into the questions. If you're good with that. If you could live in any time period, when would it be and why?
Well, it sounds a little bit like contrived, but I would say I'm 69 now, and I've lived in the best era. And why? Because I started traveling extensively when I was a teenager. I made a lot of money. I worked on the oil pipeline, worked 2 years, kind of 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then I traveled the world. And it was at a time when each country was radically different. There was no global retail businesses, no Starbucks, no McDonald's, no nothing. And when you went somewhere, it was a massive education in a very short amount of time. And then I got to see the world become globalized. And the other thing I got to see was when I was young and in business, the world changed linearly, like on a straight line. It changed a little bit year by year. And you could actually do like 5-year budgets, 5-year forecasts, and things like that. Starting about 1998, I'd say, when the web, became available and information became available, starting about that time, that line became exponential. So the amount of information that started coming through, it's beyond belief, and it can almost make someone feel inferior that they don't know anything because there's just so much of it. And I've seen, so basically, this is the best time to have lived, I think, because these two massive things, information and globalization, occurred, and I can see the context of it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we're in a time of exponential growth. Yeah. I totally agree. Okay. If you could have a dinner party with 5 people, dead or alive, who would they be?
You need people that are willing to provide a wild opinion. And usually entrepreneurs are people that have ideas that other people haven't caught up to yet. And it scares a lot of people. So, and you need people that will also expose those ideas but listen to the other ideas. So it's got to be with 5 people, and you have 5 powerful people, you need people that actually understand how to listen too, or it wouldn't be any fun. So I think within that realm, it'd probably be Elon Musk for sure. I mean, that's a kind of a no-brainer, and everyone would say that. I'd say Peter Diamandis. Peter runs the X Prize. He was the first one to set up the X Prize for space, and he runs a conference each year called Abundance 360 about converging technologies of the future, and so he's in the future, and he's living this exponential life that we live in, and so he's really an amazing guy. I'd probably pick Ayn Rand, the woman that wrote Atlas Shrugged, as I think is probably the #1 capitalist book of all time, and I think especially for a woman, because it was a woman protagonist in it in business, and I think that's critical. Maybe even Tony Robbins. I know Tony a little bit. Again, all these people they're not constrained by the norm of the world and how it looks, and they're so open to possibility. So I think that would be a wonderful dinner. Maybe Winston Churchill, you could throw him in there.
Yeah, looking for those people that are open and willing to listen as well. It's an incredible combination to look for. So we're here in BC. It's a beautiful place. Yeah. What is your best part of your day usually?
I mean, I live a charmed life, so if I did that, then I'd really feel sad for the rest of my day. But if I had to really say it, I love getting up in the morning, and I'm still old school. I go get the newspaper out in the front yard, and I walk in my shorts, and I sit down and make a coffee and a green drink, and I sit down and I read the newspaper, and I'd say mostly, my body is beat up because I would have played tennis or gone and worked out the night before, and it takes my body longer to kind of like get loose again. So I do that, and then head into the red sauna and do my half an hour of stretching, and then come out, and then I have another coffee, and then that's it.
Your body's
Yeah,
feeling its
yeah,
best,
yeah,
and you're
exactly.
ready to tackle
I'm
the
ready
day.
to
I
go.
love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay. This is more of a deeper question.
Yeah, yeah.
So, in what ways are you misunderstood?
Well, I thought this is an interesting question because I'd say everybody is misunderstood. We basically live life through lenses glasses that we put on, and if somebody is old or young, or they're man or they're woman, or they're a racial part, or the types of shoes they're wearing, the type of car, like we are meaning making machines, and so I don't think I'm any different than anybody else. I mean, very few people know me, and I actually quite laugh when I see comments, and on an article I would have written in the newspaper or something like that, and I go, like, who are these people? Like they'd sure be able to open up their life a lot more if they thought about everyone as a possibility in life, rather than a constriction based on their minute ability to their minute lens they look the world through.
Yeah. So keeping your mind open and making sure you're able to see that.
Yeah, as maybe seeing everybody as great, and then it's a much better way of going through the world.
Yeah. Do you feel like those lenses over time, like in these recent years, have been kind of growing? Like more and more people have those lenses, or have you seen that trend kind of stay?
I think it's always been the same. I think just social media has magnified it.
Yeah.
Especially when people are able to hide behind a computer and go online and spew it out to the world. I would say the 5% make them sound like 60%, and they're really not to be listened to.
Mm-hmm. It's that over-representation from
Yeah,
social media.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The word genius is derived from the word genie.
Yeah.
Meaning those people who are referred to as geniuses can see things outside of themselves.
Right.
So what skills have you had that have enabled you to see trends where others couldn't?
The way I look at this is we're all given genetic, a makeup. And like I have twin boys, and I'm just stunned at how different they are. And so, and I have 5 boys, and they're all like radically different. So there's no we're all kind of delivered on this earth, and I'd probably this whole nature versus nurture thing is really interesting. But I do like the quote that if your kid was adopted into another family, they'd be exactly who they are. It wouldn't matter what that other family was like. So now that I've done that, I've lost the question. The question was...
Yeah, so what skills or what
yeah.
things do you have that makes you so you can see those trends?
I think, my genetic makeup is one, like I'm incredibly bored easily. And because I'm bored easily, my mind kind of goes, well, how can I unbore it, so to speak? So I kind of like... I think there's a calculus equation where you take something to the zero, or you take it to the max and the min, right? And I think that's what my mind is always doing. So I see something, and then I'll go, what is the far end of both sides of this opinion or of this idea? If there's a trend I see, like maybe it was, back in '98, 60% of graduates out of university were women. Like that's a massive trend, and it was 30% when I was in university. So then I extrapolate. I go, okay, well, what if it was 100? What would happen? And then what would happen to our society? What would happen to childbearing? And of course, a lot of these things that I thought of came true. Like childbearing is now like decreasing at like almost an exponential rate. It's actually linear, but so that's what I think my expertise is standing in nothing, being bored, and taking those equations to the max and the min, and then seeing where the world can go.
I love that. And do you think that's kind of exclusively nature versus nurture? Do you think it's something that people can kind of grow and over time and work on as a skill?
I think you can choose to be a different person. The interesting thing that I've noticed is that when people actually choose to be a different person, I actually think that's part of their genetic makeup. And it's a little bit like the body drops hormones to put molars in, or for go through puberty, or to I think at the age of like somewhere like 25 to 28, you want to have children, and I think it's hormones dropping you to tell you it's time to reproduce, type of thing. So I think there's a oh god, I lost my train of thought.
There's like an element that you can decide, but it's who you are.
Yeah. I think there's a time when you think you have power over your life, but it's just your genetics allowing you to have the choice at that time.
That's a cool perspective. That's amazing. Okay. What role did competitive swimming have in your life as an entrepreneur and just in your life in general?
Well, I was a successful competitive swimmer, so I was good at it. And I overwhelmingly, number one would have been there's a direct relationship between hard work and results. And so that would have been the number one thing I got out of it. Now, swimming is a lot easier than a lot of other sports because there's an actual time, distance and time. So you know exactly whether you're better or not. It's not like ballroom dancing or something, or even being on a soccer team where maybe the other people on your team aren't as good. You never really know how you excel. You can't. Everyone needs a Gretzky on their team to probably be great. So
yeah, that biggest skill. So I'm a first-year student here at UBC Sauder, the school down the road. If you were to create a program for business students like me, what would that look like?
I think it would look like this. I think it would, and maybe I have the advantage of having to set up like a stall on the outdoor mall in Calgary when I was 25, and I really have a perspective about making a product and setting up and having no idea whether anyone wants my product or not, at how to market it, how to price it. But I think there's something, if you had, let's say, what do you have in a semester? Maybe 10, 12 weeks, right? And every week you had to come up with a new product, and you had to set up on Fridays in the sub building at UBC, and you had on a table, and you had to display your product, sell it, and price it. And basically what I'm saying there, it forces a lot of learning really, really quickly. And I think it really gets people used to failing and failing fast. And I think it's amazing what happens when you have very little money and very little time, how much creativity comes out of people. I think the worst thing that I've seen in business is too much time and too much money. It's a recipe for failure.
I love that. Yeah, like learning through failure, pushing yourself, and
yeah, people have to learn how to fail. It's a great, great skill.
Okay, that's amazing. So the outward success of Lululemon is often celebrated, but what roadblocks did you face that people don't see?
I mean, yeah, it is amazing. Everyone would think, it's an overnight success that took 30 years to do, right? Number one, when you're in manufacturing, is that you can't make any money until you can get to economy of scale production. So basically in apparel, you need to be making at least 2,000 of every style before you start making any money. So how do you put your product out there? Nobody knows about you, and yet you've got to, and yet you can't even get your money back until you've sold everything in order to make your next 2,000. And then what do you do when all that product is gone? It's really messy. But I'd say inside of that is that it takes so long to get to that economy of scale production and to get your brand out and to get people to understand the quality of the product and what the product is meant for, that inevitably the number of times you run out of money is it's every entrepreneur's nightmare. And how do you get money when you can't have it, when you haven't proved a concept, because only people want to give you money if you proved it. So, again, when people ask me about that, I say, you probably have to do like I do. You have to go like suffer for 2 years and go find yourself a job in a place you absolutely hate, trade your life in for money and get enough money and start it off yourself.
Yeah. Is that the advice you would give to someone in that similar
Yeah,
situation?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Otherwise you end up, giving too much away of your idea if it's a really good idea. I also like the idea when you're first starting out to get in with 2 other partners, and I did that at West Beach. Why? Because I knew nothing. I knew a little bit about product and brand, and I ended up being an expert on it. But I had another partner that was good at sales, another one that was good at the office and the banking and that, and I would have known not how to do that, but I learned by being with them, sharing in the responsibilities, and and the failures. But at the end of the day, then I had to split the profits of it. But I think there's a time to kind of do that and learn quickly when you're young, and then kind of go out on your own.
Yeah, have that humility to know what your expertise is going into it.
Yeah, and you got to find out what you're good at, and make sure you know how to hire for what you're not good at.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're looking at your 25-year-old self who just graduated from U of Calgary with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, what would you?
7-year bachelor degree.
Yeah. What would you tell that person, that version of you, if you could talk to them right now? Any advice?
What would I tell them? I'd tell them that every person in the world is an individual with a different genetic makeup and a different upbringing, and the way that you're thinking is so radically different than every other person in the world and incomparable that if you have an idea and you want to move forward with it, don't worry so much about the competition, because nobody will be able to replicate you and the way you think about it.
Yeah. Wow. That's some incredible advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So you're a well-known goal setter in all areas of your life. You've listened to a lot of other podcasts that you've been on in interviews. How is your approach to goal setting different than other people's, do you think?
Well, I do firmly believe that a goal has to be written down. It has to be quantifiable, like an accountant could say yes or no, and it has to be a firm by when date. Like 11 o'clock, December 24th, 2025. Like it's got to be that specific, because only in that case then can the subconscious brain actually work on it 24/7, which is what you want. I think that the big difference that I coach people is that one, a lot of people say, well, your goal should be attainable, and I think 50% of them you should fail at, because I'm really trying to teach failure or in goal setting. The other thing I find is that people are really self-limited on what they think is possible for themselves based on their past experiences in life. So I've seen women, incredible women who, had a union father who just hated the management and hated the man and hated anybody that made over $100,000 a year. And yet her daughter went to business school and would kind of get into a business, and she was so confident she'd get promoted and she'd start making over $100,000 a year. But then she would she would self-implode, because the expectations and what she thought her father would think of her is so limited her in what she was capable in life. So when we set our quantifiable part of our goal, it's usually based on the past, some past experience which is self-limiting, as opposed to like, what if I stood in nothing, like absolute nothing? What if I had no past? Then what goal would I set? And that's probably way more realistic about. And then because you only have one life, so you want to get the most out of your life, and why be self-limited?
I love that. Yeah, and just the ability to not let that past kind of influence your future,
Right.
especially with goals. Beyond teaching sewing and fabrics, what lessons or things did your mom instill in you?
Well, I'm an interesting hybrid, because I'm half Canadian, half American, and my mom was the American part of it. And and if you wanted to kind of again, look through the lens of who Americans are, like they're kind of a little bit unstoppable. I think mostly because they don't have a government that tells them to stop and don't be successful, and you're bad if you are successful. So I think she had this kind of mode that anything was possible. And I remember just being around dinner one night, and we had this kind of like thought about, like if a plane went by, you just can't transport yourself up to the plane when it goes by. And, my mom would argue that, just wait, like that's going to be possible. And that's how she kind of like brought us up to go, not again, challenging our self-limiting beliefs. And I think my mom was probably a little bit future oriented and future driven and could probably see trends in how the world was going. And I don't know if we can necessarily like transport ourselves up to a plane yet, but we're probably not too far from it.
That unstoppable belief of just
Right.
pushing the future. That's
Right.
amazing, yeah. What makes businesses running in BC unique in the global sense of things, and what advantage did starting in BC give you, do you think?
Well, I'd say I didn't start in BC, and I started in Alberta. And I think it's really important because I'd say, I was reading the Globe and Mail recently where it had the top 100 fastest growing companies in Canada, and 20 of them were out of Calgary and 2 of them were out of Vancouver. So I think being in Calgary and raised there till I was 30, I had the opportunity of everybody in Alberta is out for everyone to win. Where I come to BC and everyone seems to be out for everybody to lose. It's just kind of a different thing. So now that's the economic part of it, and that's the political part of it. The thing that was so beautiful about BC, I think, are two things: is our multicultural group of people here, and especially the Asians. And I think the Asians came here from Hong Kong, or originally, and I think they were highly educated and very family driven. And I think that they did that better than the Caucasians here in Vancouver, and they kind of upped our game. Like we had to like level up to them, and so then being able to have that conduit to Asia for business, and in Vancouver, I think or all of BC, let's call it, it's been an incredible thing for us. And then I think from my point of view, being in the technical apparel part, there's very few places that have a temperate rainforest where there's mountains that go into the ocean where you can snowboard, ski in the day, and kite surf in the afternoon. It's bike, and you can bike to work or run to work. You don't ever have to get into a car if you don't want. It's an amazing place, and I think that created the atmosphere for I think. There's probably 5 or 6 world-class companies in Vancouver that are all based here, probably out because of the athletic nature of the city.
Yeah, like that trend and that community that's built around here, and also that community in Calgary of pushing up one another. Yeah, I love that. You're running so many incredible programs and initiatives now, and raising 3 boys. How did
Five
you?
boys.
Five boys. 5 boys now. Yeah, no,
I guess 2 of them are grown up.
Yeah, 2 of them are grown up now, but 3 of them are more. Yeah, we're younger now. But how do you sort out your priorities day to day?
Well, I think it goes back to the goals. And I have, a long-term vision for my life, and then I have values, and then I have 10-year goals, 5-year goals, and 2-year goals. And in each one of those years of 10, 5, and 2, I'd have 2 for personal, 2 for health, and 2 for business. So I have 18 goals altogether. I print them out, I post them on the board, and usually in the washroom, because when I'm peeing, it's the best time to read those kind of things, and I read them over and over again. And so, I know that those goals are embedded in my subconscious. So then I'm making any decision through the day, it's based through the lens of those goals. And so it prioritizes my life really easily.
Mm-hmm. Letting those goals kind of guide those everyday actions and those values as well.
Yeah, and like a lot of people, I look at my next day and my next week often, and I make sure I prioritize and take out things that aren't important and put in things that are important.
Yeah, it's such a practical kind of thing that we
Very
can do.
practical.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay. So you've also mentioned the idea of kind of those self-limiting beliefs. So in other interviews, you've talked about this idea of when you wake up pretending to have amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do this, why is this concept important in both our lives and also in business?
Well, I'd say most businesses fail, and probably a lot of people fail in life because of It's called the innovator's dilemma, and I don't know if you know it, but it's like let's pick a company. Kodak, for instance, it's an obvious story, but they were making film and they were making and cameras. They were making so much money doing it that when some guy came to them inside their company and he had invented the digital phone, they squashed it because one, it would take money to develop. They'd have to build a new market for it and would kill what they had. So I think most people are like unwilling to leave something successful behind to build for the future. So I think it's a real art to get rid of almost like there's another term, like it's really hard to fire someone. It's really easy to fire someone bad. It's really hard to fire someone good. But you've almost got to do that to your own thoughts, your own business processes, your own products.
Mm-hmm. So it's like those scary sacrifices that we don't want to make.
Right.
Yeah. What qualities do you think people are most lacking today?
I don't think there's anything that they're lacking. I find it hilarious. Of course, I've done a lot of reading in my life, and there's not an adult anywhere in for the last 2,000 years that's written that hasn't complained about the generation under them being lazy, no good, bums. And then they all grow up, but even hippies grew up to be successful business people. I think it's a fallacy. I think it's just a time of life. People are discovering themselves and they're trying to figure out what they're good and bad at, and I think eventually I think especially when people just, get the desire to have a family or, to get married and have a family, things change drastically, and they take all their learnings and their lazy times and people change quickly.
Mm-hmm. Just having that grace for almost like yourself and others, just recognizing that we're all on this path.
Yeah.
We're all changing.
You're just one of billions and trillions that have come through the same path.
Yeah. Get rid of those lenses, get rid of those limiting beliefs. Yeah. Moving forward. I love that. What's the most significant thing that you've changed your mind about?
Well, I think it's not a Brene Brown specifically, but it probably is, and I think it's about being vulnerable. And so I don't think I really thought of it. I think as an entrepreneur and a business owner, and I was always like super positive my whole life. Like, why should I dwell on anything negative? Like, it just made no sense to me. And the minute I'd have a negative feeling, I'd just put in action to take care of it, type of thing. But inside of that, I probably, with employees, I could never, if they were having a tough time, I didn't have like sympathy or empathy for them. I can never remember which definition of each one of those it is, and I probably didn't sit with people. I probably expected them to like take care of it and choose a positive life, and that's how I would train people, and it's kind of how I brought my family up too. But now I can see where people have a very tough time approaching me, family and business people, because I don't have that. I haven't given them that space to kind of wallow for a while, and so I think what I've learned is that people need to like sit in a little bit of misery for a bit in order to have context of it and then bring themselves out of it. If they don't sit in it for a bit, they're never complete with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you think that those people can like find that balance between like sitting in it yet taking action and finding that balance?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot myself. Like, how long should you sit and wallow for? Is it 13 seconds? Is it like 5 days? Is it 5 years? And I do fully believe everyone has the free choice to change the way they're thinking at any minute and any time. But I think it's successful in business for an entrepreneur up to a stage, and then I think what kind of gets you to where you are isn't going to get you to where you're going, and probably I needed to be different, and I'm looking at that.
Mm-hmm. So recognizing those tools and how far they can get you. Yeah. So your catchphrase, for lack of a better word, is elevating the world from mediocrity to greatness.
Yeah.
practically, what are some tangible things that you would suggest to people like me or people around the world to elevate the world from mediocrity to greatness?
Well, I think generally people don't have context to how big is big. So, I mean, maybe I'm giving a story, but I think I always, like, if I was given a job or given an opportunity to do something that was way out of my realm, I took it every time. And knowing that I was going to fail, but oh God, I got that opportunity, and then I got to see what greatness was. If I can say another thing, it was like my parents were divorced, and we had no money. My dad was a phys ed teacher, and my mom was stay at home, and less than no money. But my mom saved up every year, and we'd do one thing, and that was we would go to the best restaurant in Calgary once a year, and get dressed up and go. And it was like, oh, my mom was trying to show me what great was in customer service and in food. And when I got engaged to my wife in Paris, we couldn't afford, like a nice hotel. So we stayed in a pension type of thing. But for the one night we got engaged, we moved into the Georges V because I wanted to know what the best hotel in the world was actually like. But I could only afford one night. So I think within this kind of conversation, it's like, for me, a lot of it is just training and putting in a training and development process for the people who work with me or for me, so that they have the opportunity to find out what great is, and then they can choose for themselves whether they want to live that life or not. Because there's a lot of people that can't handle living a great life. It's very scary to them.
Yeah.
So they keep themselves in mediocrity.
Mm-hmm. And do you think exposing yourself to that greatness or exposing others to that greatness, do you think it's like a subconscious practice that makes them want to emulate that greatness, or do you think it's a choice that they have to make?
I think it's a choice they have to make. Some people just don't take it on. It's a genetic makeup, I think, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about your time in Alaska.
Yeah.
on the oil ring. You read 100 of the top books.
Yeah.
Your time there. And you've continued this tradition to this day. So how did exposing yourself to that much content, and also you're traveling around the world, how did exposing yourself to that many different experiences shape who you are today?
Well, I think about when I started my retail store when I was 25 years old, and I was 25, and I had people from all over the world come into the store, and I had, every nationality, every religion, every age, every sport, every anything, like all over, and I noticed that I could open up a conversation with anybody and get connected to them. Why? Because I was so well read that I could connect on some kind of level with them. I think even for me, like when I was like 20, I think I was 29 or 30, I ended up moving to Toronto for a year. And so when I came back from Toronto for the year, I now understood like cottage country and the 401 freeway, and I understood what it was to be on in the East Coast, and how different that culture is in the West Coast. And also I could read books and understand what that meant to those people, to when they're talking about like an Eastern Canadian culture, or for that matter, any culture in the world, because you start reading 100 books a year over like 50 years, and that's a lot of books. And so I have a lot of context.
Yeah, it just allowed you to draw those lines and connect things.
I can connect with anybody in the world on any level.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So practically from that, even, what are 3 books you'd recommend to young people today who are trying to get started and give themselves that context moving forward?
Well, I think it has to be enjoyable first.
Mm-hmm.
Like reading has to be enjoyable. So I think that, like a lot of things you take in school are really, really good. I mean, like I look back to, the books I read in university or in high school, but they were for learning, right? And it didn't necessarily get me like, oh, I want to read all the time. So the thing that I'm going to say is like, what are 3 books that would, if I was to have read them when I was 18, I would never stop reading. And probably they're all funny ones. And Lonesome Dove, I think Pulitzer Prize winning book about a cattle drive from Texas to Montana. Catch-22, which is, I think, is the 7th most read book in the world and probably the funniest book ever written. And so that's funny. I'd say The Potato Factory. It's a weird one, but it's just it's not really funny, but it's so accessibly easy to read from anybody's point of view that once you've read it, then you want to read the two after it, like, immediately. And I think that probably falls into the the Emperor's Stone. No, what is it? The Stone. The book about, or Harry Potter.
Yeah, the Philosopher's Stone.
Things like that,
Yeah.
or the Hobbit and stuff like that are unbelievable. But I think first off, you have to give people like books that are accessible to them, and then they develop the context for reading, and then it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, I love that, making it enjoyable first and making sure we're actually being accessible to each person. So we're nearing our end of the time today,
Right.
but what question did you wish I'd asked you?
Actually, I'm really happy with the questions, and I won because I've answered all the other ones so many times that I think it's kind of nice being informal, and I really appreciate that you actually researched past interviews and kind of said, well, there's no point in putting out the same information again. So I think you really attacked it from a whole different point of view, and I think it was fully complete. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It's an incredible interview. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure. This is where we shake hands.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Leadership Lessons. If you've learned anything new from this episode at all, I'd really appreciate a 5-star review and follow this podcast on your preferred platform, as I'm trying to reach as many new leaders of tomorrow as possible. You can see short form content and what we're doing on Instagram and LinkedIn, as well as long form videos of these episodes on YouTube. On each of those, I have my email available, so feel free to shoot me a message. I'd love to connect. Thanks for listening.